Alrighty, it is my friend Omarosa back here on Mea Culpa. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, you were number 2. You were my second guest, I think, behind Rosie O'Donnell. Or were you number 3 after Scaramucci?
I think you put me after Mooch, and I still am in my feels about that. So,
yeah. Well, listen, we've got a lot to talk about, and you're just the perfect person for me to talk to. I mean, so thank you for joining us. Let's get started here. So I want to ask
before
you
we get
this.
started, love to the family. I love you.
Yeah, I know, and we love you. So here we go.
Okay.
How would you assess Trump's current re-election strategy compared to the 2016 campaign, especially given his focus on law and order and economic recovery? I mean, you were there, right there at the beginning, thick and thin, the whole 9 yards. And we're going to talk about like the National Diversity Coalition that I made you, participate in, and you were so instrumental in that. So how would you assess the current re-election strategy?
Before I go into the re-election strategy, I have to take you back to us walking through the empty space in Trump Tower that would become the war room for the campaign.
Yeah.
And you had a vision for that campaign and how it should be structured and how instrumental you were when there was only 13 or 14, I think, people at that time. You laid the groundwork that would become the blueprint for Donald Trump's victory to presidency. Okay.
Well, I'm not proud of that anymore.
No, but I think it's important. I had to lay that down so that we can properly assess his current strategy, because without going back and looking at what started out as something that was supposed to be something positive, a new approach to politics, turned into what it is right now. So in terms of 2016, Michael, you did have a vision for improving the quality of lives for Americans. You did have a vision for making things better for businesses in this country and making sure people didn't have to decide between filling prescriptions and filling their gas tank. I remember these conversations. But now Donald Trump's strategy has gone to a very divisive strategy, something that, like you said, I wouldn't be proud of, you wouldn't be proud of, and most people recognize it's not something that we are proud of as Americans. So his strategy, I believe, at least in the last 2 weeks, because it was different when it was against Biden, his strategy against Kamala is just not to lose, right? His strategy is not one that was built on the 10 principles that we mapped out in that original diversity plan. Do you remember that?
Oh, I sure do.
That doesn't exist anymore. I really think that Donald Trump recognizes that he has come up against a formidable opponent, and that, he is faced with a possibility of not returning back to the White House. And as a result, he's panicking. He's not any good when he's panicked, when he's backed into a corner, when he's up against the ropes. And that's exactly where she has him. And so his strategy is thinking that the more attention he gets, the more bombastic that he is, the louder and more repugnant that he is. He thinks that that's a winning strategy. And I'm here to tell you that just won't work this time. It's no longer a novel.
Right? I mean, the strategy that I tried to lay out early on was one of inclusion. And it was one of the reasons why with Pastor Darrell Scott, I said to him, as you keep going out and you keep talking to people, your audience is almost 100% white. There's no diversity, and hence the formation of the National Diversity Coalition for Trump. And I got you and I got so many others, including the evangelicals, to come on board. Whoever thought that by bringing the evangelicals on, the end result would be an overturning of Roe versus Wade and an imposition upon a woman's, reproductive decision-making freedoms. I mean, this has gotten so out of control. And you're right, his divisive, his vitriolic, his hateful comments, especially towards a woman of color, and a strong woman of color. He doesn't understand. He's completely outmatched. And the schmucks, these fucking dummies that he has around him, They don't understand. They just don't understand. They're so myopic in their thoughts and in their process that they are allowing him and putting him before groups like the National Association of Black Journalists, which we're going to get into. We're clearly going to be talking about that. But I'm with you. What a mistake. The strategy is just all wrong. In fact, let me go one step even further, because I want to talk about this later on, but I think we have to talk about it now. The assassination attempt on Trump. And I started hearing people turning around and talking about it wasn't a bullet that grazed his ear. It was shrapnel either from the teleprompter or from the podium or something else that ended up nicking him, because he didn't even take a single stitch. Right? Which is why he doesn't want to release the medical records on it and all. But I tried to explain to him, you can't discount, though, that there was an assassination attempt on the man's life. Now, you who have legitimate religious upbringing and faith, he could have used this, whether he really believes it or not, he could have used this as a major pivoting point in not just his life, but the campaign, where he would come and say, I had to come to Jesus moment. And this entire ordeal with the divisiveness of America, we need to heal, we need to unify, we need to be one. He could have used this ordeal, which would shake the shit out of anybody. But instead, I actually thought at that point that I was going to get this weird phone call from a blocked number, and it would be Trump or one of his people saying, he wants to meet and he wants to apologize for everything that he's done to you, from the incarceration to the unconstitutional remand to the just basically throwing me under the bus. And he intends to do that with a whole bunch of people that he has hurt along the way. But no, goes right back to the strategy. Double down, triple down, etc.
He actually, first of all, I want to acknowledge the firefighter who lost their life on that day at that event because of that sniper's bullet. And to their family, I expressed, such sympathy to them, because that has to be hard. But you're absolutely right. Donald squandered an opportunity to pivot and to reflect on just how blessed he was in that moment, that whether they say a half an inch or whatever, he'd be dead. But he said in a rally, and this is when I realized that he just didn't care and he wasn't capable of change. He said, they said, are you changed or do you feel different? He says, no. He said, in fact, I think I've gotten worse. Now, how many people do you know, Michael, who would survive a near-death experience, and instead of reflecting and pivoting to gratitude, to change, would pivot and say, in fact, I think I've gotten worse? That shows that you are rotten to the core, that you're just not capable of having the type of emotional maturity that you need to be a leader of this country.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. So, I want to go back to the whole thing with the diversity coalition that, again, you were so instrumental in. And I want to ask
I was on TV with Bruce last night, just so you know. And he said that.
What's that?
Bruce. I was on last night with Bruce Lavelle, and
Why?
he claimed to be one of the founders of the diversity.
No, he wasn't. In fact,
I know.
We dumped him. We dumped him twice, and then he asked twice to come back, and we did. He was not a founder of it in any shape or form. In fact,
it was so funny. I don't even want to give him airtime, but I just have to acknowledge that there are a lot of people pretending to have been instrumental in the creation of that, and you created that, and it was a vision. I think it's important to acknowledge that you had that vision of inclusivity, of bringing all these different groups, nationalities, backgrounds. It didn't matter of your income bracket, of your education. You wanted everyone at the table so that we could reflect what this country looks like. Yeah. But Bruce was not a co-founder, and I just wanted to say that.
And what show were you on?
CNN.
Oh, Jesus Christ, CNN. Unbelievable. They've really gone to the dark side I mean, this is like a Star Wars episode. So let me ask you this then. What do you see as the key differences that you've observed in Trump's approach to minority outreach this time around, particularly with emphasis on opportunity zones and criminal justice reform, which he, in the interview that he did with the National Association of Black Journalists, claims that he has done more for the Black community than any president ever, and probably even including Abraham Lincoln.
Let me tell you what his strategy is for outreach, and some of his statements are just so insane that they're just downright weird, right? Some of them you can't even just combat. But I think that his strategy is that they have come up with some pathway in their mind to the presidency without gaining any more African-American support. Contrary to popular belief, I don't believe that Donald is doing African-American outreach. I believe that someone has gotten in his ear and convinced him that he can get there without an increase in African-American turnout, particularly African-American male turnout. I'm telling you, I think that that is what they've told him, because he has made no concerted effort or meaningful outreach to the African American community. And if you approach the Black community as a monolithic group, then you've already lost the Black community. He said on that stage with NABJ, I have done a lot for the Black, it was the way he said it, the Black population, right? That's how you know that he's looking at groups and numbers as opposed to human beings and families and communities. But when he said the Black population, he was looking at it from a numeric standpoint,
right,
and not at a very humanistic standpoint. And I'm telling you, he's convinced that he can get there, that he has a pathway to the presidency without an increase in African American turnout.
Right, and without getting a significant, and I mean a very significant portion of the Black vote, or of the women, and I mean women of all color. The only pathway that he has is to a cell, because that's when all of these outstanding indictments will be forthcoming. I mean, he's managed to delay it as long as possible, but these will all come back to fruition if, in fact, he doesn't if he doesn't win. And my prediction is it's not just a loss, but I think it's going to be an ass kicking, which then brings me to another question here, right? How do you see Trump's relationship with you personally, right, evolving since your time at the White House? I mean, I remember when I came to the White House and you were like, oh my God, Michael's here. And it was like, you came running straight over, and, you were spending a lot of time with my daughter, that was there. Especially in light of your criticisms in the media, because a lot of people don't remember that they tried to shut you down. Lara Trump tried to shut you down after you left, right? As public liaison, for the White House. They tried to shut you down by paying you off. Remind my listeners about that episode, and whether your relationship has changed, or has it just stayed non-existent? I'm curious.
So, yes, it has changed, and it's because I didn't want anything to do with him. And a lot of people say, oh, it stopped because of him. I'm like, no, it absolutely stopped because of me. He tried to have, as you mentioned, Laura, but there's a whole long list of other surrogates that he had reach out to try to mend our relationship in terms of our professional work relationship. But the biggest overture, as you stated, came from Laura Trump, who, when the personal appeal did not work to bring me back into the fold, then she did go into offering $20,000 a month forever, right? To do, as she said, absolutely nothing. We'll put you on the payroll. You'll just come back in. And, Donald really wants to have a relationship with you. Donald is not used to, and you can attest to this, Donald, he is not used to having a fight with somebody in his circle and not being able to just make up with them. Remember, he fought with Steve Bannon. They fought, he kicked them out, they battled, he came back in. Gorka, they fought, they came back in. Like all these people.
Roger Stone. I mean,
Stone, they fight, they come back in. Donald is not used to having those types of disagreements with people, disputes, whatever, and him not being able to charm them back into Trump world. And so, the fact that I, rejected every single overture, including a call from Sean Hannity, I can list a whole lot of people, I don't want to do that, who called and said, oh, just forgive the guy, come back in. And with a whole lot of offers. But I said that it was incredibly important for me and my growth and moving forward, that after 17, 18 years that I had recognized things and discovered things about Donald Trump that I didn't like, I didn't think was good for the country, and I didn't want to be a part of. So I think that he's still in shock that none of those overtures worked, those offers, the payoffs, none of that worked with me, and that I just walked away, completely clean from that world and asked for nothing or need anything from them. So when you ask about the relationship, it is non-existent because I have put up a wall, and not the wall he said he was going to build in Mexico and have them pay for it, but I have built a wall around me to keep Donald from getting to me. And they have tried over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, I remember that you called me and you said to me, "You're not going to believe this shit. I mean, Lara Trump is trying to pay me off," and I was like, "What?" And and they're going to be using RNC funds. Now all of a sudden, you got the fox is in the chicken coop, right? And you think that the chickens aren't going to get slaughtered. I mean, this is somebody that was using before she was even
in the RNC,
she was in the RNC, right? They were using
pay off people,
to keep them quiet and the whole 9 yards. And there was like a multitude of people that they ended up putting, into the RNC. That was like the hideout for people that stepped away, that they were afraid that would come out and be mouthy and talk about Donald Trump and the time with him and the mistakes that he made and his behavior and so on, which, I think you might be the only one. I really do. I think you're the only one that actually.
One of those kids that was in the White House wrote a book, and then next thing I know, he went silent, and I reached out to him, and he said he took a job at the RNC. I was like, oh, I know what that is code word for. Yeah, right? I knew what that meant.
Exactly. Exactly. So, to those MAGA morons that are listening to the show or those that are listening to this, program and know people who are MAGA morons, remind them where their dollars are going. When it goes to the RNC, it's going for payoffs from people so that they, remain silent and not talk truth to power. That's where your money's going. So hopefully it's considered well spent.
And they put it in writing. What's crazy is they put it in writing. They put it in email. They'll text it. It's the craziest thing. It's documented how many people they've offered RNC funds to remain silent.
Because they don't believe that the rules apply to them. But so obviously this is going to be a very, so it's a rhetorical type of question. You think Trump's base has expanded or contracted since his last campaign? Particularly, what I really want to focus in on is suburban and rural voters.
Well, let's dissect what you call his base, right? Because you call them MAGA morons. I'm not going to call them that, right? I know that that's how you've characterized them, but I think that people are entitled to choose the people that they want to follow. There are consequences for following those folks, but I think that Americans are entitled to that. That's what makes our country great. There's a base of those folks that are part of the MAGA movement. But remember in 2016, 2017, there were a group of people who were just curious. They were curious about the circus that was Donald Trump. They wanted to see more entertainment. They thought it was like subscribing to another season of The Apprentice. And I don't believe, and we saw this with his battle against Biden, I don't believe that those folks are still with him. We know this because we saw the exit polling from the last election,
Mhm.
that they had defected away from him.
Elevate every morning with Tommy John's second skin underwear, because what you put in your pants can make or break your day, and the luxurious support of second skin guarantees that everything will go smoothly. And we need smooth. So when you wear Tommy John, you're much more comfortable. And when you're more comfortable, you can do everything better. Tommy John's stylish and soft second skin underwear has dozens of comfort innovations, like a supportive contour pouch and breathable, lightweight, moisture-wicking fabric with 4 times the stretch of competing brands. With over 20 million pairs sold and thousands of 5-star reviews, guys everywhere love their Tommy Johns. I mean, that's why Tommy John doesn't have customers. They have fanatics, like this one who raves, the most comfortable boxer briefs ever. There's no downside. Buy one pair and you'll never want to wear any other underwear again. I mean, I've been trying different brands of trunks for the past few months while wearing a similar product for the past 3 years. Second Skin is by far the most comfortable I've ever worn, hands down. I mean, that's my opinion, hands down. They are the most comfortable. And I know because they're soft and they hold you right where you need to be. So look, I'm certainly one who wears them. I am one who recommends them. Tommy John is the way that you want to go. Plus, here's another part. Plus, your most valuable assets are always covered with Tommy John's best pair you'll ever wear, or its free guarantee. So get 20% off your first order right now at TommyJohn.com/Cohen. Save 20% on second skin at TommyJohn.com/Cohen. That's TommyJohn.com/Cohen. See the site for details.
And they continue to move towards the center, not towards Donald. So your question about whether or not his base is expanded, the MAGA movement is going to remain. Those folks are going to remain solid. But unless Donald Trump is able to pull a lot of those undecided voters into the fold, he's not going to get anywhere near the White House again. And he has been failing. And with the selection of J.D. Vance, he has alienated even more of those undecided independent voters, particularly, what did they call them? Single women with cats?
No,
right?
childless cat ladies.
Childless woman, cat ladies. That's the independent, rural, a suburban woman that they actually need. So I just don't understand. What do you think? Do you think the rumors are true that it was Don Jr. that helped
I know for a fact it was. It was Don Jr. along with Peter Thiel that made the pitch for J.D. Vance. And I don't know what the relationship is between J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel, but Peter Thiel has been funding Vance for a very long time. And somehow or another, there's something going on also. And it's got to be financial between Peter Thiel and Don Jr., where he convinced Don, and it's not that hard to convince Don of anything, especially if there's a buck involved in it. Right. That J.D. Vance is the right guy who can help to bring, the election around to Donald Trump because of his age or his positions, and that he's more MAGA than I don't know. But it was Peter Thiel and Don Jr. that made.
Well, it's going to come at a big price, no matter what deal they cut with Peter Thiel to promise to finance whatever support. He is paying a significant price for that choice. I believe that choice is worse than even the Sarah Palin selection.
Oh, yeah.
I just, every day something new is coming out that is repulsive that J.D. Vance has said about some marginal group, about some diverse group of people. He has alienated all of the people that Donald had been trying to reach out to bring into his base. And it's just going to get worse because remember, October surprises are my favorite surprises. I don't even think the worst of what we know about J.D. Vance has come out and will not come out until weeks before the election.
And remember too, again, it goes right back. He had the greatest opportunity to take advantage of the assassination attempt. And whether it was a bullet that grazed him with a shrapnel, as I believe, it's irrelevant. There was an assassination attempt. He could have had that come to Jesus moment where he said, all this has to stop. It all has to stop. And he could have pivoted, and he could have tried to make a claim as to why the independent voters should be voting for him. Whether he believed it or not, he could have done it. Just very stupid strategy by just a group of people who are so, again, myopic in their
But who do you
process.
think he should have selected instead of Vance? Who do you think would have helped him in any way?
Well, the question is, would they have accepted the nomination or
Tim
the
Scott
request?
would have accepted. Vivek would have accepted.
Tim Scott is as bad as J.D. Vance. You need to go with somebody like, could you imagine if he would have brought on somebody like a Liz Cheney? Could you imagine
Or
he had a or who did
Nikki
you say?
Haley?
Or Nikki Haley. By the way, you will acknowledge that Donald does have very good political instinct. We saw that in the 2016. He does. Do you know that his choice, he was going with Nikki Haley up until the point.
Really?
Yes, he was. Yes, he was.
I heard it. That is a scoop.
I heard it from an insider. He was going with Nikki Haley until the Peter Thiel, Donald Trump Jr., involvement and their insistence that it be J.D. Vance in order to win this election. And they got into his ear. And with Donald Trump, the last person who breathes into his ear owns the brain. Yeah. And that's the mistake. He was going with Nikki Haley. He could have gone. He
would be doing well if he had her. If he had Nikki Haley right now going toe-to-toe with Vice President Harris and whoever she selects, he'd have a running shot.
I agree.
At this.
I agree. Totally.
And now he's saying the vice presidential choice doesn't matter.
Right. I mean, it's just.
I disagree. I disagree.
It's of course he disagrees. He's only saying it because Vance is such a putz, and he's making even bigger mistakes than Donald is. I mean, look. Let me take it to you this way. Recent polls are now showing that Kamala Harris is leading Trump in almost all the key battleground states. Whereas before, when it was Biden-Trump, Trump was leading by 2, 3, 4 points. Yeah. She's now leading, I think, in Michigan by plus 11. In Michigan, plus 11.
Well, they're saying it's because she has a honeymoon period, that it's going to die down.
Right. They keep calling it a sugar rush. They got a million names for it. So far, it doesn't seem to be slowing down. And the more they keep putting their foot in their mouth, the more that I guess the honeymoon stays active, right?
Yeah.
How do you think that this might influence his campaign strategy going forward?
Well, I think that he is going to avoid debating her, Michael. I don't think he's going to step in the ring with her. He saw the consequences that President Biden paid for having a dismal debate performance. We saw what he did on the stage with the National Association of Black Journalists. We know that he can't take it when somebody just continues to fire off at him. So I think his strategy is going to come up with every excuse in the book to avoid stepping in the debate arena with her, because he knows that she's formidable. He's called her stupid. He's called her DEI. He's called her uneducated. He complained that she only took her 2 times to pass the bar. But when you stand next to a person on a debate stage, the scrutiny is completely different. And he knows that when he is compared to her, he's going to look like a dogged, ragged, owed man. And it's not going to be a good split screen at all.
Yeah, totally.
So from a strategy standpoint, he's never going to be. I just want your viewers to recognize Donald J. Trump is not going to get in the debate stage.
I mean, I think he's already said that, hasn't he? Hasn't he already said that he's not?
No, he actually changed. He changed his perspective.
Oh, yeah.
He said once he decides on her vice presidential nominee, and then he threw some random stuff about Obama in there. then he would make a decision about whether or not he would debate her. So he has not closed the door on debating Vice President Kamala Harris.
Okay, so I want to go back and I want to sort of combine 2016, our time together,
Okay.
to 2024. And just imagine there you are sitting in my office. We're about 50 feet away from Donald. All right.
Yeah.
And we're having a conversation about, let me ask you a question. What's your thoughts about Trump deciding to even attend the National Association of Black Journalists Conference, this interview, given especially how he has this contentious relationship with not just the press, but also communities of color? How would that conversation have gone?
You're not going to like this, but I would actually advise him to go, but take a different posture. I think it was a missed opportunity. I think that he should have shown some contrition about his past statements and name calling and vitriol towards African-American journalists. I think he could have endeared himself because, Michael, when he wants to be, Donald Trump can be charming when he wants to be. It's shocking when he does it, but he can do it. And with the right preparation and coaching, Donald Trump could have taken that opportunity to make inroads. But he would have had to have the right talking points. He would have had to have the right people around him. And he would have had to have it feel like a safe space. It sounds like he walked in hot. And the first question should have probably came from Harris Faulkner instead of from the ABC reporter. But under the right circumstances, I would have advised him to go to that particular event, but to make an attempt, at least, to try to make inroads with them by being contrite.
Yeah.
That's what I would have advised.
So I probably would have gone a totally different route, and we would have we'd be having this conversation across the desk, and I would say, yeah, but let me say this. You know as well as I that Donald has never apologized for anything. I mean, look at
one time. Yes, he did.
Oh yeah, what was that?
One time, and you were helpful in this.
Oh yes.
Remember, we convinced him that he had to look at what he did with Central Park 5.
Yep.
And this was an opportunity for him to show contrition. And you guys fought over it. And finally, he went back and forth and he gave that really brisk, harsh statement.
Yep.
But he said, I believe that they were innocent. And that was it.
Yep.
That was
tough. That was tough. Yeah, that was
but it was
that was the tough one.
It was about the Central Park 5.
Yeah.
So he did one time. One time.
I would have said to him, I think what we need to do is we need to call upon the 150 Black evangelical pastors, and I think we need to bring them back to Trump Tower, and we need to do some sort of a meet. We need to do some sort of like another meeting or something like that prior to you doing this conference, because right now your relationship with the Black community is really bad. It was almost, it's as bad as it was with the Hispanic community after he descended the escalator, calling Mexicans drug addicts, rapists, murderers. But there are some that are a few good, right? I want to actually concentrate on one specific question that came up by Rachel Scott. And I'm glad that she was the one right out of the rip to come straight at him with it, because he's looking for Hannity softballs. And you're not getting that from Rachel Scott. She's calling it. You're there before this association of Black journalists, you opened yourself up to questions. So if you watch the entire thing, as I did, and I know that you did, what do you think that the atmosphere was like in that conference room, especially when Trump responded to the remark about not knowing Kamala Harris was black? I mean, we heard the roar of the attendees. What was your take?
I think that Donald prepared and chose that particular venue to drop that particular nugget. And I know that he realized the implications and the impact of that statement. He basically went into a black space. He played in their face, and then he pulled out a question about her race, right? That was all strategic. 1, 2, 3. In terms of the atmosphere, I talked to several people. I used to be a member of NABJ when I was in broadcasting, who talked about how a lot of people actually left. They walked out on that. There were lots of boos and jeers, but apparently there was a constituency of folks that were there to support Donald, shockingly enough. I don't know if that was pre-planned or if they packed some folks in the room with them. And that section of the room, the section that you can hear cheering. But overall, I understand that a significant number of people left the room and walked out or stood up and turned their backs on him because they could not believe that he came into their space, in their face, and he was attacking her in that way.
I mean, it's crazy. So I actually pulled the transcript, into it. We tried to do that. I mean, he turns around and he says, and let me go a step actually here. So he goes, I love the black population of this country. I've done so much for the black population of this country, including employment, including opportunity zones with Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, which is one of the greatest programs ever for black workers and black entrepreneurs. I've done so much. And when I say this, historically, black colleges and universities were out of money. Again, it has nothing to do with anything. He goes on, they were stone cold broke, and I saved them. Thank God for him. Right? And I gave them a long-term financing, and nobody else was doing it. I think it's a very rude introduction. I know exactly why you would do something like that. And let me go a step further, because that wasn't just enough. I was invited here, and I was told my opponent, whether it was Biden or Kamala, I was told my opponent was going to be here. It turned out my opponent isn't here. You invited me under false pretenses. All right. He then goes, I mean, this is some of the greatest things. That was the part that I was referring to, though, about Kamala being black, fell under the question of DEI. And Donald does not know what DEI even stands for. So as a safety crutch, he says, define it for me. And they go on and they have this whole thing. But Rachel Scott says, I just defined it, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman? So he says, stupidly, well, I can say no. I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time, indirectly, not directly very much. And she was always of Indian heritage. And she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black. And now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know. Is she Indian or is she black? I mean, I don't even know. And it's wrong for me to kind of instill my gasps, the gasp that I let out when I was watching this as a white male. So I'm going to ask you, my dear friend, what was your take when you were listening to that? Especially, Donald, like 18 years.
My question really, it raised more questions. Is Donald Trump German or is he Scottish? Or is he Swedish, as he alleged in his book, The Art? Yeah.
Right.
Even though his family's not from Sweden, right? My reaction was not surprised. I'm sorry. I knew that he had a stunt up his sleeve because Donald always has a stunt up his sleeve. So I knew. And then when he said it, I said, that's it. That was the bomb that he wanted to drop in that room at that moment. I was trying to figure out what he was going to do, what he was going to announce, what magic trick, that he was going to abracadabra. And that moment was the moment that I knew that he had up his sleeve and he was ready to kind of spring onto them in that space.
One second. What's the strategy? Because it goes back to the very first question that I asked you about how this campaign strategy is different than 20. What strategy can anybody think is a positive strategy when you are attacking a black woman and saying that I didn't know she was black?
Because, Michael, remember, let's take it back to 2015, 2016, wall-to-wall coverage of everything Donald did, everything he said. This was the first time in a long time, except for the assassination, where Donald knew he was going into an event where there would be wall-to-wall coverage. He knew that they would be just hanging on to every single word he uttered. And he seized that moment and he took the moment to just drop a huge bomb, an explosion in that room, which has ricocheted around the world. I mean, I looked at the apps, the headlines around the world app, and it was on the covers of most newspapers. He knew exactly what he was doing. He did not go there to gain more voters, Michael. He didn't go there to make inroads with the Black community. He didn't go there to announce some new diversity policy or cultural advancement or anything. He went there simply to gain the momentum back into his direction, to get the ball back into his court, to get the camera and the attention on him and off her, because there is nothing but Kamala Harris mania all over the country and he can't deal with it.
Okay.
That was the purpose.
Right.
That was it.
But I just don't see a
you think that's a selling policy?
I think it's a terrible strategy.
But no, Michael, think about it. The man was shot, 2 weeks ago? It was the assassination, and it was all everybody talked about. Today, is anyone talking about his assassination? No, because we know that the news cycle moves on. And guess what? The National Association of Black Journalists, as horrible as this performance was, in 2 weeks, we will not be talking about this. In 2 weeks, we'll be talking about Kamala Harris's vice presidential pick. Am I right?
Yes, but
this will be a distant memory.
But I know for a fact that Black women will never forget that moment when he questioned Kamala Harris's identity and background.
I'll never forget.
I don't think they'll ever forget it.
I will never personally, as a proud graduate of Howard University, the same university that she went to, as a proud African-American woman, right? I will never forget what Donald Trump did there. But a lot of the electorate will, unfortunately.
You really think that?
Yes, Michael, no one's talking about half the things this man did in the last month, let alone what they'll be talking about in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, everybody will be obsessing over who Vice President Kamala Harris selected to serve as her vice president. That will be all the talk when they go into Chicago, and that's what we will talk about. No one will be talking about top of mind what Donald Trump said at the National Association. Now, I will keep reminding folks, you'll keep reminding folks, and a lot of people will keep bringing it up. But that's the only way that it's going to live on beyond the next thing that he's going to do, and the next stunt, and the next vitriol he spews and the assault.
But you made the perfect point here, which is that nothing that these things are doing is creating one single additional voter to come for him, which again is a losing strategy in 2024.
Black voter, because Michael, I think that in their calculations, they believe that they have a path to the presidency without going through Black women, without gaining one single additional Black vote. I'm telling you how they're
I
thinking.
don't know. I think there are plenty of
That's
white
why
people, but I think there are plenty of white people that are as insulted, with Donald's comments, as the next guy, or
I agree.
woman,
I agree.
And I think it's just, again, if we're looking for a country that's united and equitable for all, these sort of comments, it just not only do they show how ignorant he is, but also racist. And it's just, I mean, do I think it's a large number? Yeah, I don't know what the number is or isn't. All I know is in a thinly, decided race, which everybody keeps saying that this is going to be, these are really extremely important because he couldn't stop there. So Rachel Scott, asks him again, sir, it's a direct question. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is a DEI hire, as some would tell me she is? And Trump turns around and he goes, I really don't know. I mean, I really don't know. And then he goes to the accordion hands, right? Could be, could be. There are some, and there are plenty. I know this lady right over here. Harris is a fantastic person who just interviewed me at length. And we had a great interview, I think. And I heard you got very good ratings on that interview. I mean, he can't even acknowledge that she is not. And I just think it's, again, I just think it goes to the very foundation of, or I should say, the lack of substance that Donald brings to the table.
Do you know what DEI stands for in my space, not diversity, equity, and inclusion? When I hear DEI, I hear didn't earn it, DEI. He's basically saying she didn't earn it.
Right.
And when you put it in that context, when he says she's a DEI vice president, he's saying that she didn't earn it.
But they go
when
even...
he says that he says that because Biden dropped out and she became the nominee and he's a DEI nominee, he's saying she didn't earn it.
They go even worse. Oh, they go even worse. They go even worse than that. They claim, and there's a whole slew of Trump's acolytes, these sycophantic assholes, that are talking about how that she used sex and so on, sexual favors, in order to advance herself throughout her career. That is pervasive all over social media. All right.
So I must not be in those spaces. I've seen one or two things, but maybe because I haven't. But of course, Michael, I block a lot of those bots and those nasty things. And so maybe I have filtered so much that I haven't heard a lot of it. Maybe you have, and maybe the way they target ads towards a white male, maybe they are targeting and sending that stuff to you. In my space, I might be getting rainbows, glitter, and sparkles in my inbox, but I'm not getting a lot of that. I have seen one or two statements about it, but it's not resonating in the communities, in the spaces that I'm, operating in the messaging that I'm hearing. But I know that it's out there.
Yeah, and
right?
it is
I
out
think
there.
that it's echoing in the maggot universe, but may not be as pervasive in the communities that are, I think, a little more mature and evolved. And quite frankly, Donald should be the last person, and his supporters should be the last person to talk about someone's sexual past when he has been found liable of raping a woman in a department store dressing room.
Yeah.
And having to pay, what is it, $80 million?
93.
How can you talk when you're on the hook for $93 million because of sexual assault? I'm sorry, that is weird. And I'm sorry to use the buzzword of the day, but that's weird.
Yeah, it is very weird. But can I say something else that's weird? Can I go one step further here and say something that's weird?
Sure.
Right? So Trump, during this NABJ interview, claimed that, and the quote is, immigrants are taking Black jobs. All right. And by the way, you're talking to a group of journalists. So all of a sudden, I mean, I'm just trying to figure this out. And then, of course, she presses him on. Well, what does that mean? What does Black job mean?
Yeah, what does it mean?
I don't know. All right. Is he trying to say low pay or some menial type of labor? You understand that you are sitting in a room that is filled with Black journalists from all the major papers and all of the newspapers that aren't major, right? So are you trying to tell me that these immigrants who are sneaking across the border are somehow taking Black jobs? I mean, are they taking Tim Scott's senator's seat? Are they taking Kamala Harris's vice presidential seat? What are they taking Congresswoman Crockett's seat? I mean, whose seat are they taking? What job are they taking that he's referring to? And of course, he had no answer for it. But I wanted to ask you, how do you interpret this comment? And what impact do you think that it'll have on his support, again, amongst Black voters?
You know, when Donald said Black jobs, what wasn't said in that is this undertone of racism.
Yep.
And the racism, it reckons back to when this country was divided and when segregation still existed. Hell, it might even go all the way back to slavery, because Black jobs back in slavery were slaves who had to do really demeaning manual labor, picking cotton, right? Working out in the fields. That's what Donald Trump is talking about. He is making a racist statement when he says and talks about Black jobs, because in the land of the free, home of the brave, all jobs are available to all people in this country, right? If you want to be a doctor, you can be an African-American doctor. You can be a Latin doctor. You can be it doesn't matter if your life is on the line and you're faced with a life or death situation. Does it matter what race that person is, as long as they know how to do the work? So Donald Trump was taking it all the way back to his racist roots of when African-Americans were picking cotton and doing menial labor and menial jobs that he sees as demeaning. It goes back to a story that was shared that Donald Trump didn't want Black accountants working in his casinos, that he wanted only certain types of people counting his money. These are statements that he was alleged to have said. I don't want any N-words counting my money, is what he's alleged to say. So he does.
Yeah. I mean, and you and I have had this conversation before, and I wrote about it in my book, Disloyal, where he didn't want Randall Jackson, who was in the first season of The Apprentice, right? And he made it to the finals.
Oh, Kwame.
Kwame. He didn't want, he goes, and he made that statement, which, I don't want a Black fag working for me. And someone who were like, what? Wasn't he like a Harvard graduate or something like that? I mean, he was brilliant. And he maneuvered brilliantly. And actually, I had several conversations with him over the course of that. And I was like, you could tell somebody who is highly educated and highly functional, and he certainly was. But that was always the story that that came out of Trump's mouth. And.
Wow.
I'm just blown. He never ceases to amaze me. And again, it goes right back to, for example, the assassination attempt. But actually, I wanted just to ask you this.
Sure.
The media's portrayal of Trump's remarks, especially those that are considered racially insensitive or out of touch. How do you see it influencing the perception and potentially affecting the campaign's outreach now to minority communities? Do you think that after this NABJ, that for the next 95 days, which is until the election, that there is no outreach at all to the Black community? That he's basically, as you said before, washed his hands and said that we have a path to win the election without the Black community? Because I've looked at the numbers. I'm a studier of numbers, and I don't see it. I don't see the pathway without the Black community. And I've been saying all along, between the Black community and women, they're having a majority of both. I don't see an electoral win here.
Yeah, but Donald is going to make another appearance in a predominantly with a Black audience in a Black community. He is going to go to a Black church, right? Because remember, that was the playbook that we put into place early on in the campaign. And he's going to go dust off some of those plays, and he is going to have a pastor who's willing to bring him into his church.
Okay, right.
Mark my words.
Right.
He's going to do that. So you're asking me, is he going to make any more appearances in the Black community? My answer to you is yes.
Okay.
Because he is into stunts. And will it have an impact? No. Right. It will not help him get any closer to that victory, but he's still going to do it because he knows he has to do it. Will it be effective? The answer is absolutely no.
But Omarosa, let me say this. When we did the one in Cleveland with Pastor Darrell Scott, who was my co-founder of the National Diversity Coalition, not the bullshit artist Bruce Lavelle. One of the, and I hope you put him in his place when you said it wasn't you.
I did. You gotta watch the clip.
If you can get it for me and send it, I'll post it. When we did that, and I spoke, and I was preaching before the New Spirit Revival Church, its audience, I think there were 2 white people in the audience. The rest of the audience, as it should be, was a Black church. It was, it was filled with the church's constituents. When Donald went to the last church and he spoke, it was 95+% white. And I don't understand how something like that happens. And that's supposed to now change the perception? Again, I'm lost with the strategy, ideology, and the program.
He's still going to try it, though, Michael, because he doesn't. When you don't have folks who can advise you of what the reality of the current situation is, then you make bad choices. The people around him are not getting through. He's not listening to anyone, Michael. Not the way he listened to you. He took your counsel. He took your advice. He's not listening to any of those folks, and it's very evident. You hear him talk about it. He can't help himself. They told me I should say her name correctly. But there's so many different ways to say it. I'm going to keep saying it my way, right? So people are saying things to him, but he's not taking in what they're advising him because he does not have anyone that he trusts. He certainly doesn't trust his kids. Ivanka's nowhere to be found. Where's Ivanka these days, right? Where is she? Remember how close they were. Have you seen her one time on the campaign trail with her father?
No.
Will she come on the campaign trail with her father?
Doubtful. She's enjoying the $2+ billion that Jared received from Saudi Arabia, as well as her 100 different patent that she got from China. And something. There's absolutely no reason. But Omarosa, let me just say this.
Okay.
As you know, the hour goes on. You and I could sit and we could reminisce for 100 hours, literally 100 hours, and smile and laugh. Another thing that Trump always does, as you know this as well as I, and my listeners obviously recognize this as well, that Trump speaks in generalities, right?
Yeah.
Only I can fix it. No one else. I can fix the wall. I can fix immigration. I can resolve the Russia-Ukraine conflict in 24 hours. I could resolve the Israel-Hamas war in 24 hours. In fact, he went so far as to say that he could have even resolved the Civil War in 24 hours. And you know what he's saying there. He's saying that, fine, the North stays free, the South stays slave. That's what he said.
That's his solution.
That would have been his solution. And why should any white person or, any potential slave die when we can just have it. The North is free and the South remains slave states. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, the whole thing is crazy. But one thing, while everybody was attacking Joe Biden based on his age and his cognitive ability and so on, what did we just see? We saw Biden yet again succeed in something that von Schützenpants was unable to do. And that was to secure the release of the U.S. prisoners, Gerkovich and Whelan, who were held by Russia, especially Whelan, who was there during the Trump administration. And he even put out a post saying that I and I alone can have them released based upon my personal friendship and relationship to Vladimir Putin.
But he didn't do it when he was in office. He didn't. No. He couldn't, right?
Correct.
So I'm glad that they're home. I was really grateful to see that news break. And I'm glad to see that Biden is going to use the remaining time that he has in office to try to make an impact.
And so he is. And so he is. And I think the more positive impact that Joe Biden continues to demonstrate, I mean, I think this is huge. It's huge for two reasons. One, as you just said, because now we have two Americans that were being improperly held by Russia returned home, which is really the responsibility of the government, first and foremost, to protect its citizens. But most important, but of equal importance is the fact that it shows you that Joe Biden is still on the ball, and that a lot of the tumult that was going on about his age and so on was uncalled for. But putting all that aside, you know who's going to end up riding the positive wave? His vice president.
Yeah, she's going to win. We just have to make sure that the truth about Donald is heard. I'm so glad that you continue to spread the word and spread the message. It's important, Michael, and you're making a difference. You are definitely making a difference.
And you too, my dear friend. And it's been way too long, and I want to congratulate you. I remember sitting and you telling me, I'm thinking about Michael, what do you think? Should I go to law school? What do you think? And I said, absolutely. And when you told me that you registered, and I remember saying to you, I'm so proud of you. And then after speaking to you, when it was year one that was done, and so on, and and then entering
my last year
now on L3, and I'm so proud of you. And you just keep doing you and keep rocking it, and you are a voice, and your voice must also continue to speak out, because you speak with clarity and you speak with legitimate experience because of the relationship. People don't realize the relationship that you had with Donald. Donald, and so no, not true. It was real. And I remember when I said that you were going to definitely accept the position, he was ecstatic because it was a recognizable face that he would be able to count on. And he knew that you always had his back, and your voice, again, like mine, like others, so important. So thank you for that. And as we
thank you, Michael, can I ask a favor?
Of course.
I just joined TikTok, so can you please follow me on Lady Omarosa on TikTok? Lady Omarosa.
Your wish is my command, my favorite person. So
thank you.
Love you, and I will.
Love you.
I'll speak to you later.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.